Now, the Buckeye Extra podcast with Rob Oller, Bill Rabinowitz, and Joey Kaufman from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hey, Buckeye fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Buckeye Extra football podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by columnist Rob Oller for a two-man edition of the Buckeye Extra football podcast today. Bill Rabinowitz is out, and even though it's the offseason, there is no shortage of news around Ohio State football. It's been 2 weeks since the Buckeyes played in the national championship game, and last week Jim Knowles left to become the defensive coordinator at Penn State. On Saturday, Justin Fry was in the process of leaving to become the Arizona Cardinals offensive line coach. Then the latest staff departure followed on Sunday night with Chip Kelly taking a job as the Las Vegas Raiders offensive coordinator. So 3 assistants have now left Ohio State on the heels of a national championship, including both coordinators. So Ryan Day has some coaching hires to make, and certainly will be not probably the best for the Buckeyes, but he made a good coaching hire last offseason when they lost Bill O'Brien, and 3 weeks later ended up with Chip Kelly. But nonetheless, a busy time.
Yeah, this may be stunning to some, but I think this is both good for Chip Kelly. Obviously, he triples his salary from $2 million in Ohio State to $6 million with the Vegas Raiders, working for Pete Carroll. So he's pretty happy, at least financially. But I think it's good for Ohio State too. I always saw Chip Kelly as kind of a rental. He came in, to work with Ryan Day, his old friend. He wanted out of UCLA, didn't want to be a head coach and work with all the NIL and the CEO stuff. He just wanted to coach ball. And so he comes to Ohio State, he gets his ring, and he rides that, as many do. Joey's written a story about this. He rides the championship to a marketable offer. And who's to say if they don't win it all, does Chip Kelly get this offer? Is he the man? If they don't win it all, does Jim Knowles jump to Penn State? We'll never know. I'm not even sure they know. But they did win it all. They got their rings and flew the coop, so to speak. So I just think it's a pretty good move. I think Chip Kelly, probably his interest level, this is speculation, his interest level and his excitement for the college game was like a 1-year deal. That's just my take on it. I think he was ready to go, and he's gone. And Ryan Day will have no problem finding quality candidates for both the OC and DC jobs.
I think that's right. And it's important with Chip Kelly to remember that at this point in time last year, he was the UCLA head coach. He was not in a good situation there. It looked like that tenure was eventually going to end at some point, just the way things were trending at UCLA. And he was looking for an escape hatch. He interviewed for coordinator jobs at the NFL level. Those were not materializing. And then the one at Ohio State opened up with Bill O'Brien becoming the Boston College head coach. And he kind of fell into Ohio State's lap in some ways as a guy who was looking to get out of being a head coach in college with all the additional responsibilities that come with it, with NIL and booster fundraising and being part general manager in terms of managing the transfer portal. It was an opportunity for him to be a coordinator, and probably the NFL was the first choice for him because that's where he was interviewing before the Ohio State coordinator job opened up. He comes to Ohio State, and it was really a marriage, I think, that worked great for both parties. It sort of rehabilitated Chip's reputation as a play caller, having 4 big playoff games on a high-profile stage. Really did a lot for showing the country and personnel people in the NFL maybe what he could do with superstar talent. And for Ohio State, it gave them one of the brighter minds in college football to call plays, take something off Ryan Day's plate, and help him get over the hump and win a national championship. I don't know if I'd call it a rental per se, because if they don't win the national title, maybe the Raiders' job doesn't come up. Maybe Chip Kelly stays longer. But the way Ohio State had structured his buyout, it's very friendly for him leaving for the NFL. it allows them to even waive the buyout. It's up to the athletic director's discretion. That to me also suggests that they knew that they were just sort of fortunate and operating on a little bit of borrowed time with Chip, and eventually he was going to explore the NFL route, and that's what he did here.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ryan Day was just on the Joel Klatt podcast and said that he and Chip discussed, I assume when Chip came aboard, or even before Chip came aboard, but months ago, let's put it that way, that this was a scenario where we've got a good team, we can win it all, and if we can win it all, then you have a choice to make. You can choose to go to the NFL, which is really what he was looking at, as Joe said, just I think the Seattle Seahawks. He either interviewed or was interested in the Seahawks.
Yeah, he interviewed with the Seahawks, and then he was also linked to the Commanders before they hired Cliff Kingsbury.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. So Ryan Day basically said, let's get that ring, and then you can either stick around, you'll have a choice to make, or leave. So even Ryan Day kind of knew that this might be a short-term thing if they won it all. I would say this. I was looking, I kind of compared the stats from 2023 and 2024 offensively. And of course, 2023, Ryan Day was the play caller, essentially the OC. Do I have that right? Yeah. And this year, Chip came in. So as much as Chip was this guru, he really made his money and earned his stripes during the playoff, because the regular season, and then specifically the Michigan game, when it was pretty much of a disaster, statistically, it wasn't much different from last year. And honestly, even after the playoff, when they had 4 really pretty high productive offensive games, I mean, Texas was a little bit of a struggle running it. Even then, they actually passed for more yards per game last year than this year. With all the talent they had, and with Jeremiah Smith, they had I don't have the exact numbers. It was something like a 229 to 223 or something like that. It's in my column. Go to the Dispatch. There's a plug. Go to the dispatch.com and check it out. So it's not like they were incredible all season. It's not like there was this huge jump. I'm not trying to downplay what Chip Kelly did, because the playoff did turn around. But let's remember, does it even happen if the player, quote, uprising, heated team-only meeting, which we've talked about ad nauseum, does it turn around? I mean, I think that's debatable. I think at that point, a light bulb, went off, or a hammer to the head from both the coaching staff and the players, back and forthing it, holding each other accountable, to where things changed. And the offense did seem to get a little more rock and roll ish during the playoffs, and the defense got better too. But so really, Chip made his money in the playoff. The regular season, and the Michigan game, definitely, he has to answer for that. So overall, I would say was a plus that Chip Kelly came in. For one thing, it allowed Ryan Day to put his trust in someone. I think he had to trust his coordinator for Ryan Day to give up play calling. And he totally trusted Chip Kelly. And it gives now Ryan Day one season of sort of being more that CEO and not calling the plays, and seeing that it went pretty well. He can now maybe continue to do that, hand the play calling to the next OC, and then sort of be the, have the mile high view of the program. So I think that was beneficial, and I'm not sure it happens if it's not Chip Kelly.
No, I think that's well. But I think ultimately, certainly a big part of Chip Kelly's legacy is going to be, he called plays on a national championship team. He matched wits with all the defensive coordinators in the playoff. The way they were able to scheme Jeremiah Smith open in the national title game, I think, is a credit to Chip. But in terms of the broader ramifications for Ohio State moving forward, and it was a chance for Ryan Day to finally cut the cord in terms of being a play calling head coach and delegate more, become more of a CEO. I think it'll be revealing for how he viewed things a little bit with Chip. moving forward, does he look to have somebody like Chip Kelly? Do you have another coordinator who calls plays, or does he revert back to what he did earlier in his tenure? And was Chip Kelly the exception to the rule? Well, sure, I'll have Chip Kelly call plays, but maybe nobody else is quite at that stature. And does he reclaim play calling, or does he find somebody else he trusts? I think maybe the way they hired Bill O'Brien certainly suggests that he would like to continue to turn over play calling and manage things on a whole, but he trusts Chip Kelly as much as anybody in coaching. And I think certainly Chip Kelly probably had as much autonomy as any coordinator could under Ryan Day. We'll see how that impacts things going forward, though.
Yeah, I mean, I made a statement in what I wrote today that I actually think that Jim Knowles is a bigger loss than Chip Kelly, just because
I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, Knowles' defenses they were really coming on, and I don't think even probably, what's it matter? They're both gone, so what's it matter? But I just think that the bigger loss, the harder spot, well, I was going to say the harder spot to fill is Jim Knowles, but because Ryan Day is such an offensive guy, he might be much pickier about who he picks as an OC. And Joey, we've run on the site. You probably have a better handle on this of like who potential offensive coordinators might be. I know that Kevin.
People have talked about Kevin Wilson. The thing to remember with Chip is that they don't have to hire an offensive coordinator per se. I mean, Brian Hartline was the co-offensive coordinator this year. And he was the offensive coordinator in 23. They don't have to necessarily hire another offensive coordinator. You could make Hartline you could take off the co and make him just the OC and promote Billy Fessler, who worked with the quarterbacks with Chip Kelly as part of the support staff, and make him the quarterbacks coach. I think it's early in the process, and we'll see how the search ultimately plays out. I do want to circle back to what you said. I do think Jim Knowles is the more significant loss just because of Ryan Day's background as an offensive coach and play caller. And we've seen those sides of the ball, both offense and defense, bottom out, if you will, in Ryan Day's tenure. I think you look at what the low point of the defense was. That was 21, where the Kerry Combs experiment had clearly failed. And Matt Barnes was calling plays. They lost 2 regular season games in 21 and really were beaten down by Michigan. And then last year I thought was a low point, or 23 was the low point for the offense, where they just, with Kyle McCord and Ryan Day still continuing to call plays, never really were as explosive as they had been or as efficient as they had been with Stroud and Fields. And to me, they were more handicapped by having just a defense that felt directionless in 21. So I think that's the key. Is they need a defensive coordinator with a clear philosophy and system for how they want to play on that side of the ball, because Chip Kelly was running the Ryan Day offense. They're doing a lot of the same stuff. But to me, the defensive flavor can change a lot depending on who your coordinator is. And that's why I think that side of the ball is probably the more critical hire to make, because you need to have balance between an offensive-minded head coach and a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, totally agree with that. I just think I don't know. They've got a lot of options. There'll be dozens of resumes streaming in. I would imagine that Ryan Day already has in his mind some guys, maybe a handful of guys on both sides of the ball. He'll make some calls probably to guys who you would think would never come. He might make some calls to NFL guys just to see if, just to test the waters. You never know. You might as well aim high. But he's also got some people on his own staff that he could elevate. And then there's Larry Johnson.
In both situations, which probably is not going to inspire a lot of confidence among Ohio State fans, just because they've sometimes seen the internal hires with Ryan Day have spotty results. Fair or not, I think they have good internal candidates to actually promote, and part of that's the benefit of these support staffs are now larger and more involved in coaching. So I think they do have some good internal options, either with Brian Hartline on the offensive side or Matt Curry and Tim Moulton on the defensive side. But I understand the fans who are a little apprehensive about sometimes the internal hire and the results being a bit mixed there.
Yeah, I just before you started that, yeah, and that's good stuff. Larry Johnson. We were talking about this before we came on the pod. Some people would probably say, why don't you just make Larry Johnson the defensive coordinator? I'm not sure Larry Johnson wants that. I'm not sure he's the best fit. We don't even know Larry Johnson. I mean, we were talking before the pod. Does Larry Johnson retire? I mean, Larry Johnson, I think his age has always been a little tricky. Finding that.
I say if Bill was joining us, Bill has it written down.
I think he's like 70.
72, maybe
3 or 4. I mean, he's right in that early 70s.
Hey, Pete Carroll's 73. He just took a head.
Right. Well, I know. Well, Bill Belichick's now at North Carolina, and he's 73 or 4, right?
Larry does have another year under his deal, but his I mean, he will always get questions about how long he'll continue to coach, and I think it's even more natural this year because they won a national championship, and they won a national championship in a way in which the guys that he had recruited and developed over 4, 5, 6 years had really were the linchpin of the title with Jack Sawyer, the strip fumble return for a touchdown, and the way JT Tuimoloau was able to swallow quarterbacks. And so I think that makes it natural to wonder what his future will be. But he was on the road recruiting like a lot of Ohio State coaches were last week. So
I think Larry's a lifer. I think he loves it so much. I'm not going to say I don't know Larry Johnson. I know that he loves football, and I don't know what other outside interests he has. Does he like to travel? Does he want to just kick back? He seems like he just loves what he does. Hey, you wouldn't still be doing it at that age if you didn't love it, right? You'd be out. In 65. You are. Give me my Social Security and I'm out of here. So I don't know where Larry Johnson ends up next year. I'd be surprised. Let's put it this way. I would almost be more surprised if Larry Johnson left than the Knowles or Chip Kelly departures. Knowles was a bit of a head scratcher, but I just think that Larry Johnson loves it so much that that's what he does. It's who he is. And so I don't think he'd go anywhere. Plus, I don't know how guys, I actually thought with Chip Kelly, I don't know about you, Joey, but I wondered if with Knowles leaving, if Chip Kelly would feel like he didn't want to leave Ryan Day kind of holding the bag and having to fill two positions. Clearly that was not the case. And what it tells me is, it's really not that hard to fill those positions. Now, you never know. I mean, it's, what you had, you don't know what you're going to have. But, Chip Kelly, the friendship was strong enough that he could say, I'm out of here for $6 million to Vegas. Good luck finding somebody to replace me. With Larry Johnson, if he left, that would mean you've got to replace both line coaches and both coordinators. At some point, it gets a little dicey into having to fill all these positions.
Yeah. I will say this for the timing of Chip Kelly's departure. He's not leaving Ohio State in the lurch as far as this is during the middle of the playoff run or this is during the middle of spring practice. I mean, they have over a month until spring practice begins. The dead period is in effect. So they're not on the road recruiting at this point in time. He was recruiting. Chip was visiting quarterbacks as recently as last week until they had to be off the road by the weekend. And I think that was helpful for Ohio State. And now Ryan Day can be very deliberative in his process and go about trying to interview and figure out who he wants to hire as his offensive coordinator, because you do get a fair bit of runway before spring practice. And he did this last year where lost Bill O'Brien in February and made a hire, which should give him some confidence. I know I mentioned the thing about Day's internal hires, but you look at who he's hired as coordinators the last 2 times. Jim Knowles was a Broyles Award finalist when he got him from Oklahoma State. Then he hired Bill O'Brien, who had just been let go from the Patriots. And then obviously got Chip Kelly, who was a home run hire. So the recent coordinator hires probably should give you some confidence in terms of who he can get. And then I thought Carlos Loughlin was a good hire from Oregon last year. And then the way Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins ran last year, I think, was a testament to the coaching that they got from him. So the recent hires have been good. He's been more deliberative lately in some of the process. And it probably helps them that he's not trying to juggle playoff prep where they have an upcoming opponent they're trying to prepare for, a game plan, and trying to make an assistant coaching hire. In terms of their to-do list, it is very much right now staff hiring mode. The portal's not open. There's no games to prep for unless you count Texas in 200 days.
Yeah. Didn't he hire Jeff Hafley also?
He did. Jeff Hafley and Greg Madison. That was the first post.
Yeah, those were both.
So he was
both
2-3 in terms of his defensive coordinator hires. Hafley and Knowles, and then Combs did not work out.
Yeah, I always felt the Combs thing was sort of like he's on the staff. I'm not saying Ryan Day felt pressure, but I think he wanted to keep Gary Combs on the staff because he was excellent and is an excellent recruiter.
Yeah.
So how do you keep him on? How do you keep him on the? How do you keep him on the staff? Yeah, how do you keep him on the staff if he really wants a promotion? Well, I don't know how it went down, but bottom line was that one didn't work out, but the other ones have.
And even the OC hires, keeping Kevin Wilson, they were plenty good on offense those early years. The only blip was 23 where they lose Wilson, but for the most part, I would say he's 2.5. I don't know. It was hard to grade Hartline on that because he was the only coordinator and he wasn't calling plays, and that was the biggest downgrade they've had at quarterback. So, but overall, I think the coordinator hires there's been more good than not.
It'll be interesting with Hartline. You and I have talked about this. Does he want to be? Well, first of all, does he want to be a head coach? And he has interviewed, right?
He has said yes that he wants to be a head coach. He
wants to be a head coach. Does he think he can jump from wide receivers coach / sort of code offensive coordinator to head coach? Can he make that jump, or does he feel like he has to be an actual OC play caller first?
I think he's clearly going to be. I mean, he reminds me in a lot of ways of Luke Fickell, who was on multiple Ohio State coaching staffs, was very choosy for a long time before he actually became a head coach at Cincinnati. I think he was on the staff for over a decade before he actually left for UC. So that something like that has always kind of felt like his career trajectory, where especially for Hartline, who made his money in the NFL, and it's so lucrative to be a high-level assistant at a school. I mean, he's approaching $2 million as an assistant, and it's a good setup to have. So I think you just end up being selective in the jobs that you get. But it's tricky because if you're going to be selective about some of the jobs, well, those jobs are also going to interview other high-profile candidates, and they're harder to land. So then you end up in a situation where maybe you stay at a place longer.
Yeah, I just don't know what he wants. He says he wants to be a head coach, but does he want to be a head coach at a MAC school where a lot of guys leave and you're
making half his salary at a MAC school?
I know. It's a tough. That's why you're a little bit. It's a little bit like the golden handcuffs in tech. When you have a tech job, I know my daughter's out in California. It's like she can't really leave tech because the drop off in salary is so high. So even if you don't love tech, you're kind of stuck. So is that right? Is that Hartline? I don't know. What do you think of Kevin Wilson? I kind of have mixed feelings about Kevin Wilson. I mean, I think he's really good at what he does. He's a little older. Would he come back? There's a question. His son's on the team, right?
The son was a walk-on, yeah. Which I'm not clear on if he could. I think he could come back. He might have extra eligibility, but I don't know if he's planning to come back. I believe he.
Oh, okay.
He participated in Senior Day, which is not always precluding somebody to return. I mean, he's not employed by another school. He was at Tulsa. And he was let go during the middle of last season, so. You don't have to worry about trying to buy him out. It would seemingly be available if he wants to be an offensive coordinator. And I think he certainly has play calling credentials. But does Ohio State want some fresh ideas
Yeah,
but it would be, I see the validity to it. You do need to hire a quarterbacks coach, and that's part of the Chip Kelly thing is you have to replace him on both fronts.
that's true. That's a good point because I think Kevin Wilson was offensive coordinator, tight ends coach.
Yeah,
Maybe.
he had coached. He has a background in coaching quarterbacks. He was when he was at Ohio State, he was the offensive coordinator and the tight ends coach. But when he was at Oklahoma, he did coach the offensive line.
Sam Bradford, right?
Yeah, and that would be actually interesting if you brought him in as like an offensive line coach slash co-coordinator. But that's also a lot of recruiting responsibility as well to handle offensive line and be involved in coordinating the offense. But Wilson was the QB's coach in Northwestern, so he has some experience with both of those. It certainly would be an option for them if they went that route.
And they need a line coach too, right?
Yeah, because Justin Fry's now with the Arizona Cardinals, which I think I don't think any assistant probably repaired their stock as much as Justin Fry because he was in the last year of a deal that was not extended. Last year, this was sort of a prove-it situation, and they only signed 3 offensive linemen in the high school recruiting class, and there were just, I think, generally questions about his ability as a recruiter, and certainly there are other factors recruiting in this era with NIL, but Ohio State did notably miss on David Sanders, who ends up going to Tennessee. I think ultimately with Justin Fry, though, you have to tip your cap to the way he was able to coach an offensive line that had 6 different combinations of starting offensive linemen this year, lost their Remington Trophy winning center instead of McLaughlin, lost the starting left tackle and Josh Simmons, and they have this patchwork line that get them to the top of the college football playoff. And I think that was a big reason why he was able to ultimately get a job with the Arizona Cardinals, and he'll be reunited with Paris Johnson there. So it's a good move for him. I think Ohio State would have certainly brought him back if not for a chance to move on to the league, which seems like a good fit for him. You'll just have to develop linemen and doesn't have to worry about the recruiting part of it, which was really the knock on him during his 3 years with the Buckeyes.
Yeah, exactly. Again, you win a ring, opportunities arise. I'm curious whether all the drama on the O-line this year, if it didn't help him focus. And it didn't, like, sometimes you can just kind of, when things are going well, you're just kind of like, okay, let's just not make any changes here. Everything looks good. It was so dramatic, all these having to move, shuffle things. It really tested him. It looked good. You're right on the resume where he was able to patchwork that thing and get him to the title. But B, maybe like in life, when things are really busy and almost chaotic, you can really kind of drill down and just really focus on the essentials.
And in some ways, the pressure was off of him because of those injuries. I don't think people expected that unit to be the reason that Ohio State could win a national title. I think people expected that would be the reason they might lose in the playoff, and the issues on the recruiting trail and the injuries, all of that would catch up to them at some point, and it looked like it did against Michigan, but they really rebounded and repaired it, and maybe it's a case where you have nothing to lose.
Right. Yeah, it's a little bit like the playoffs with the offense. Just open the spigot, let the wide receivers do their thing and go for it, and it worked out. Anyhow, a lot of changes. A lot of and more news to come. Who's going to fill these positions? Right. Are we done with guys leaving? I would think so, but why never say never? I mean,
we'll get closer to finishing this out because the NFL hiring cycle will wind down here. So just the number of landing spots will become fewer and fewer. I think it'll end up pointing toward more who Ohio State has hired. I do want to close on this, maybe to finish this as a thought. I wrote a little bit about this, but it is not unusual for champions in the playoff era to have this kind of staff turnover Clemson is the only school in the playoff era that has won a national title and then brought back both of its coordinators. Everybody else has lost either an offensive or a defensive coordinator. A lot of those guys coached under Saban, and those guys got head coaches. So what Ohio State is experiencing is pretty typical. What's a little different is none of those coordinators who left took a coordinator job at a conference rival. They all have head coaching jobs, or in the case of Todd Monken, who was at Georgia when they went back to back a couple years ago, he left to become the Ravens offensive coordinator. So Chip Kelly's move as a recent parallel, Jim Knowles' move, you got to go back over a decade for when Jeremy Pruitt was the defense coordinator at Florida State when it won a title, then left to go to Georgia. So that is an unusual move. I do think maybe that the rise in coaching salaries at the assistant ranks have made those maybe more of a possibility, where you have a school like Penn State who could feasibly pony up $3 million to poach somebody. But I just wanted to kind of come back to that and make a note of that. If Ohio State had brought back everybody and had this continuity for an encore, that would have been pretty unusual. It's hard to kind of keep guys together because the playoffs a big stage. People are going to notice if your defense or offense is the reason you're winning the title, and they'll look to maybe snatch somebody away.
Question for you. You are our NIL expert at the Columbus Dispatch.
If there's such a thing, I don't know if anybody actually understands.
I guess I maybe know the answer. Can NIL be used for coaches? Is there anything to preclude them using NIL money to throw at coaches? Or does that go against either NCAA rules? I can't imagine.
No.
But
Ryan Day has a quote-unquote NIL deal with Kroger. Kroger pays him $75,000 a year to endorse shopping at the local supermarket chain.
Right. I guess I was thinking more because of the NIL, like the foundation and some of these. I don't know. It's an interesting thing because if you give to one of these, what are they called? I never remember the name.
The collectives.
If you give to a collective, are you giving to keep, Jeremiah Smith? Are you giving to because you want to go get a Caleb Downs?
That if you are,
yes, you are. But are you also giving, or are you just giving blanketed, like use it how you want? I'm just curious if you gave $100,000, let's say, in a collective, and then money gets used to keep Chip Kelly, for example. It obviously didn't. What do you think of that? Is that like, I don't know how the collectives work. Like, do you have saved or where it goes? You just giving? I have never heard of the collectives using money to keep coaches, but I guess we wouldn't know that, and maybe it does happen.
Because the collectives don't do any deals with coaches.
They don't at all.
It's all the athletes.
Is that a legal thing, or just kind of like they just don't?
They just don't. I don't think there's anything precluding it because coaches are free to strike endorsement deals with whatever company entity they so choose. And collectives being an entity, I would see they could do it. But I think the way that things are delineated is the athletic departments have typically been the ones responsible for paying the coaches and
Sure.
with the money. And the collectives are in recent years have become the ones who are providing compensation to athletes. So there's been a kind of a delineation.
Well, I get that. I'm just saying, so Ohio State maybe offered let's say they offered Jim Knowles 2.75 and Penn State offered 3.1, and a lot of people were saying, well, Ohio State could have matched that. They had the money to match that, but maybe maybe the budget precluded it or whatever. I guess there's nothing stopping the NIL to say, hey, we'll kick in a mil or a half mil or whatever.
No, if you are like a local corporate or a corporation, like you could kick in $500,000 for Jim Knowles would be wearing your T-shirt or whatnot. There's nothing that
drinking from your coffee cup.
Right? Yeah. He had a lot of McDonald's up there at the
he did
the podium at the Woody.
Yeah, he could be like Saban with his Diet Coke, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so coaches have always been able to do that. that sort of thing. It just
well, that clears it up. I was just curious whether the collectives ever do that or have been called upon to do that. Probably maybe they just see no coach is really worth it. I don't know.
And I mean, the athletic department can pay them direct salaries without any sort of a salary cap. So there's really, that's not been a focus or priority or reason to do that, just because the athletic departments have much more significantly large coffers and are not encumbered by any sort of salary cap.
Yeah, good point. All right. Well, it'll be interesting the coming weeks. I don't know how fast this will happen, naming these replacements, but I would think by the end of the month, wouldn't you?
I would think so.
Yeah.
I would think they'll have people in place by spring ball, but that's not going to be this little second to last week of March. So they'll certainly have it before then. I would think they would still want guys in sooner than later, but you also have a chance to be deliberate and selective and make some good hires.
Yeah.
So that was Rob Oller. I'm Joey Kaufman. As the offseason news cycle continues, stay tuned at dispatch.com, and thank you for subscribing to this as well. And we'll have updates periodically as news develops. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Be sure and subscribe to the Buckeye Extra podcast in the iTunes Store, the Google Play Store, or on Stitcher.